So so the next question is kind of what is it? ADU here. It's an accessory dwelling unit. And basically, the first point that's important to make is this word accessory. What we're talking about tonight are housing units that are on a lot that already has a house on it. So if you live on acreage or have an empty lot that you're thinking about building something on, that may be very possible and wonderful, but it doesn't qualify under the parameters of ADU code and opportunity that we're talking about here. So I want to make it really clear that anyone thinking of that would be looking at another process for production than what we're talking about now. Anything we're talking about will be secondary to an already permitted existing house. And so it can take a lot of forms like this slide shows. Our new accessory unit could be attached to the primary house. It could be separate, an attic or basement conversion, a garage, either an attached garage or a detached garage. It could be something above the garage or some kind of other expansion. So there are a whole lot of looks of how the physical form, of these accessory dwelling units could take. Any questions on that general form? Okay, with that then, let's talk a little more about the names of these things and what the options are called. So we've got three options that we're talking about here tonight of accessory unit. And California allows 3 homes now per residential lot. So it's really a new realm that we've entered into. What we've traditionally called single family housing and single family lots are now really allow multiple homes, and that's up to 3. And so that means the primary home plus an accessory dwelling unit and plus a junior accessory dwelling unit. And so we're going to talk about what the definitions of those two, ADU and JADU are. And then your Arroyo Grande code allows you another option to go the primary unit plus a tiny house on wheels. And so we'll talk about how that's a little different and the opportunity is there. So that's kind of 3 different types of ADU option available, and really important to know some distinctions between the 3 types. And it's good to point out here that none of these allow vacation rentals under this kind of new ministerial permit that state law mandates. Vacation rentals aren't an option. So that always comes up, and people who are interested in doing this for vacation rentals might want to tune out now. People can have grandfathered vacation rentals or go through a different longer process and potentially have those, but not through this process we'll be talking about. Any questions on that itself? Okay, we'll go on then, and let's look at these 3 types of unit. So first of all, our accessory dwelling unit, our ADU. A few parameters, and I'll show you a table after we quickly go through them. So the table will kind of help with the comparison. But the important note is on these 3 types of homes, they're all full residential dwelling units with full sanitary facilities. That means some at least kitchenette for cooking and full bathing. So when we talk about projects like the 5 Cities Homeless Coalition's Cabins for Change Village that's just opened, it's on a lot by itself, so it's a bit different from this. But those tiny houses may look the same as some of what we'll talk about, but they don't have plumbing within. They share bathrooms and eating space outside of the house. So it's important to talk about some of those kind of temporary places are quite different than these fully equipped units for permanent living that we'll be talking about. And so an ADU by Arroyo Grande ministerial code can be up to 1,000 square feet in size and as small as 150 square feet. And so the California code does allow up to 1,200 square feet, but in Arroyo Grande, the process is a little more extensive at larger than 1,000. So we can talk more about those details if some people want to later. But it's also called the carriage house, granny flat, mother-in-law, a bundle of other names for this thing. And it's important to note, unlike the other two types that we'll be talking about, the accessory dwelling units don't have any owner occupancy requirement. So if you have a rental property that you're thinking of putting this on, or you might sell a place that might become a rental place, these don't need to have an owner occupant. Any questions on the accessory unit in general?
Okay. If you don't mind, a general question. So you said since some of us here are not in the city of AG, you said California allows up to 1,200 square feet. So are you saying if we're in the unincorporated area of AG, we've got a couple hundred extra square feet there to work with?
Yep. The county code and state law do allow for up to 1,200 square feet.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yep. So that can help you a bit if you're looking to do something a bit larger. And everyone, I see there are a few notes in the chat. Rustin may be able to answer some of them, but I'm terrible at fielding the chat and presenting. So I'll read through those after the presentation and get to them. But if they seem relevant or will help you straight at, feel free to just call out and we'll deal with them and talk about them right in the middle if it helps. So with that, let's look at the next type of unit then. That's our junior accessory dwelling unit. And it'll help if my forward buttons work. Okay, good. So here we have the junior unit. So it's a bit smaller and a little different than our ADU. It's only up to 500 square feet. And the main thing is with a JDU, it has to be fully contained within an existing structure, including an attached garage. So it can't be a new structure. You can have a couple square feet of like added entryway or some such, but it's basically a part of your house or garage that you'd make into a second unit. And again, you'd have all electric cooking facilities. And in this case, the JADU isn't required to have its own private bathroom. But in most cases, if you're going to the effort to permit a JADU, you'd want it to have its own bathroom. But in theory, you could get this permitted sharing a bathroom with the main house. So you might think of this as a home sharing, like taking a bedroom suite that has its own entry and putting in a kitchenette in the side of the bedroom suite or in a closet or some available area and closing off the hallway of the bedroom suite so that you've created a separate unit within existing space. And then unlike the ADU, right now the JADU requires owner occupancy. So any questions on that? JADU, junior accessory dwelling unit? Not hearing any. I'll go on then, and the third option available to City of Arroyo Grande, City of SLO, and City of Grover Beach residents right now is this tiny house on wheels. And that acronym becomes THO. So you'll see that used sometimes, the shortened version. And we had a demo at, this is a picture of SmartShare's demo cottage sitting in SLO behind the Guild Hall. And so if you're interested in seeing it, we did our presentation for Arroyo Grande residents there last week, but we have several of activities scheduled there. So if you check our Smart Share website events page, you can see the activity times there, and we'd be thrilled to show it to you as an example of what can work for a tiny house on wheels. So by Arroyo Grande code, a few descriptions of this tiny house on wheels. Again, self-contained unit has its plumbing, bathroom and kitchen in it, facilities to support daily living. It's licensed and registered with the DMV, so it's towable as a trailer, but can't move under its own power. So that excludes an RV from qualifying as a tiny house on wheels. And along with that, then your though has to look like a home, kind of have finishes like a home. So I like to say no fiberglass racing stripes or something that would be the aesthetic of maybe your average fifth wheel or trailer. So they wouldn't qualify. And then more substantially, the tiny houses on wheels are built just like houses. So you have stick framing, usually, or SIP panels that are highly insulated. And was there a question there? Okay, so you have a higher level of insulation and home-like construction standards. So beyond just the aesthetic, these things are built to be highly efficient and hold up, not just kind of for one season, like a travel trailer or something that may have very little to no insulation and be more for just occasional living. And on these, you've got a range of from 100 to 400 square feet. And these have to be inspected by an accredited sort of inspection agency for safety on plumbing, electrical, and insulation systems. So DIYers can go through a process of inspection to get their own self-built home certified, but also then factory builders such as the one we used can get these certifications too. So this tiny home we bought as a demo has a sort of certification sticker of safety that it meets certain codes from an agency. And at this point, I think it's also important to note SmartShare purchased this just to show how the housing can work and be an example of our floor plans for our Waterman Village project. But we have no interest in selling any particular house and didn't get any discount on this model. It was just a relatively nearby produced kind of efficient, low-cost model we thought showed well. And we've got all the specs for this model up on our website. So if you're interested to know more, like how much it weighs, 10,000 pounds, exact size, price, and other details, feel free to pull that spec sheet up from our website. Any questions on tiny houses on wheels while we're here?
Yeah, I'm wondering, like a traditional single wide trailer or something that would be in a park, like a manufactured home. Are those a possibility for a tiny house on wheels or an ADU?
Yes, I'm glad you asked. They are. Yeah, the descriptions and the different definitions of factory built housing are really confusing. And I think most of us, even in this field, don't fully understand them. But these tiny houses on wheels are kind of a mobile home or factory built house. The federal requirements say houses more than 400 square feet are mobile homes, and under 400 are either park models or tiny houses on wheels or RVs or something else. But in general, yeah, the larger factory built that are HUD certified, or there are a huge variety of factory built ADUs that can be set on foundations or brought in on wheels that are available and legal. And so that's one of the things when we talk about design and next steps, kind of gets us toward that of things that you'll want to consider what type may work for you. And so this table may help by way of giving some parameters and comparing the three types. You know, this square footage availability for ADU, JADU, and THO, we see a range of from 100 square feet to 1,000/1,200 for those of you in the county. You know, all need to have kitchens, bathrooms, basically, you know, separate access. Basically, you want these units to have separate access, but there's a little flexibility in the ADU code. Parking's an interesting one. You don't need any off-street parking for the JADU or tiny house on wheels. And a lot of the ADUs won't need off-street parking if you're within half a mile of transit. So for those of you in the county in certain areas, you may need some off-street parking. If you're that far from transit, you're probably on a larger lot, and that's not a big deal. But you know, off-street parking was a big holdup in the past for producing these things because people couldn't get enough space for parking. But now in general, most people in more urbanized areas wouldn't need parking, assuming they're within half a mile of a bus stop. So that's something that's really changed and made the process more accessible. Again, we see owner occupancy is needed for the JADU and the THO right now. I'm hoping that'll go away by state law in the relatively near term. But right now, you know, that's something to consider as you're choosing which type you may want to install. You know, whether you're actually going to live, you could live in either unit as the homeowner, the primary unit or the secondary unit. What we're seeing is a lot of people wanting to age in place and planning to move into their smaller secondary unit, you know, or to get some extra income renting out their primary. So that's certainly a legal option in any of these cases. And then ministerial approvals, also an important one just to note. What's really changed with these state law allowances is that you can get to yes. With a sort of discretionary approval, you might have to go through planning commission or some hearings, and you may not be able to get to yes on a project. With these ministerial processes, if you meet sort of the objective requirements and get the items necessary that we'll talk about turned in, you can get to yes. I'm not, spoiler alert, you know, I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's doable. Any questions on that table or those parameters? Guess I'll go back before we go on. Anybody?
Can you just comment on the ministerial approval in the county versus the city? Anything?
Sure. No difference really, except, you know, the process for ministerial approval and what's needed may vary. You know, if you look at the website for different jurisdictions, I'm laughing because if you all look in the chat, I've given you a link for the city of Atascadero's website, because we'll get into this. The pre-approved plans that you have available to you in Arroyo Grande are also shared by Atascadero, Morro Bay, Grover Beach, and someone else that I'm blanking out on, 5 jurisdictions. And the funny thing is they're all the same plans, but each website kind of puts them up differently. And you can access them most easily on Atascadero's site. So you'll see that link there to Atascadero's pre-approved plans, and you can review them. Whereas on your Arroyo Grande city site, they want you to sign some permissions. But in general, the ministerial kind of allowance that you can get to yes in all jurisdictions applies by state law. Yeah. Any other questions on that? Okay, with that, let's talk a little more then about why build one. You know, I think probably that's all of you are familiar with some of these reasons, and that's why you're here today. But from our perspective at SmartShare as affordable housers, we're really interested in providing more options and affordable ones for our residents of San Luis Obispo County. And what we're seeing is a huge increase in single person households and incredible increase of seniors, particularly single senior women, who either aren't able to afford much housing or don't want much housing or can't keep it up. And we don't have a whole lot of small homes available for our population. So getting these things built for the population that needs it and wants it is really an incredible opportunity in front of us now in terms of options and choice for our residents. What we're seeing talking to people is also this huge need and opportunity for family flexibility, either elder adult children kind of staying in the family homes or seniors wanting to age in place and stay in the communities they love. And so along with both of those, really, these opportunities strengthen communities, kind of help seniors keep up their house and get some extra income and stay in their neighborhoods. And along with that, of course, more affordable housing. There are also opportunities to build wealth and get some extra income for homeowners. And an important one for a number of us are opportunity for sustainable building. We can use the existing resources of our existing infrastructure, our driveways, our water lines and sewer lines that's already there for the primary house. So all of these kind of reasons why people are looking at these things and why we're interested as affordable housers and why the city and the states also have interest too to meet their affordable housing mandates and their sustainable cities mandates and adding in a bunch of other good things. So with that, let's just look briefly at our options ladder. I think it really helps to put all of this kind of in a continuum lineup here to give people a sense of where one thing lands kind of compared to another. And so just briefly, if we look at this slide from the bottom left up, we see home sharing as sort of our lowest hanging fruit. And as I didn't mention up front to you joining in right at 5:30, but some of those of you earlier, SmartShare runs a home sharing program, Home Share Slow. And we see that as this incredible low-hanging fruit where people can share their homes and create housing for no capital cost. There's a cost maybe of $2,500 or so for SmartShare's matching and background screening and outreach fees. But property owners can kind of get into this for maybe zero cost or zero renovations needed, renting rooms. So that's sort of our least cost, lowest hanging fruit there on the bottom left. And then as we move into the continuum, the three or four types of opportunity we're talking about today in the middle, our junior ADUs may be constructible in a get lucky scenario where someone already has a master suite with its own entry and could just close off the door in a hallway or something. Could be created for as little as $5,000. They may cost a lot more depending on the house. So that's part of why we like to get out to sites and see what's available. But again, in the get lucky scenario, this can be done very inexpensively now. And moving up in the spectrum then, our next kind of lowest cost potential is this movable tiny house, the THO. I should have changed the slide. I think our 50,000 that we put in the slide a year or so ago is outdated. Probably our get lucky scenario on a tiny house on wheels is around 85,000. The demo cottage we bought cost us 73, and we'll look at some pro formas, but adding some site costs and permitting, probably 85 to and upwards from there for a tiny house on wheels. Moving on up, garage conversions, maybe a get lucky scenario with a structurally sound newer garage might be 70, 75,000 and upwards from there. Then if we look at new detached ADUs, we're probably in the get lucky scenario of 150,000 all in. And that's probably a bit optimistic. What we're seeing around is a low cost simple detached ADU is likely to cost around 200,000 and upwards from there. depending certainly on site constraints and size and finishes of the ADU. And so, then we go upwards from there at our top right. And it's important to note our kind of standard multifamily affordable house now is costing us upwards of $400,000 per unit. And so they're absolutely essential. But, at that cost of, we have some options that can come in a little lower and also meet needs. So with this whole array, we can provide a lot of types of units, some of them for a bit less than our kind of traditional multifamily developed affordable housing unit. Any questions on that continuum? Okay, not seeing any, we'll go on. With that, let's talk just briefly about getting started. I'll hear more, and I heard before we started the presentation a little about where some of you are at, but wanted to just kind of get you thinking about 5 steps for getting started. And the first one that I always ask people to think about and be really clear on, and particularly consult with their partners on if there are a few people involved in the process that control the property and make decisions. Why do you want to do this? Really, what are your priorities? You may have multiple objectives or just one, but kind of good to start with all the things that you want. And then, from down there, you'll have to ferret down what's actually possible with the codes and allowances and the resources you've got. But really important, first of all, to think about why you're doing this. Is it to age in place? If you're looking at it to age in place, you may want to think about having it, have easy access, grab bars, wider doors, and some of that may not be essential if you're thinking of it as a rental for somebody else. And so next step then is really kind of, as you're thinking about what do you want to do, then looking around to get inspiration. And I'm guessing a lot of you are like me, that you get a lot of incredible sort of shots of tiny housing coming into your inboxes every day. And so looking at those, what other people have done, hearing their stories is a nice way to go. We've got some links I put in the chat box to the casitacoalition.org, has a lot of slides and videos of homeowners who have done this and shots of different types of small housing. So it's a nice resource for lots of inspiration. Talking to a professional, everybody is here now with us. And we can give you some insight on what the codes allow and what kind of common cost ranges are that may be helpful to give you a sense of whether it makes sense and it's doable for you before you invest a lot of time and money to get stuck in a process. And then along with that, kind of the budget and financing strategy. Do you have cash in your pocket? Do you have access to some home equity? We'll talk a little more about financing in here as we go along, but certainly, that's key. And, where you're kind of what you'd like to do and what's possible may kind of need to make some decisions there. And then, along with that sort of strategy is the type of construction and team that you want to work with, or the team that's available to you on any given day. So any questions on that just very brief kind of list? Okay, hearing none, we'll keep going on. Let's talk a little bit then about design and type. So like we talked about, you have these 3 opportunities for a THO, a JADU, or an ADU. So what I'd say is that's kind of one of the things to think about straight up. Might I be interested in any of those types, or just one, or something else there, or maybe 2 of them,
outside
because
most of it's
you can build, like we talked about, you could build a JADU and an
They told me they don't need me tomorrow.
background looks like
It's a definitely Friday, last day of school, but they'll let me
Maureen,
know.
we've got you in the background. Maybe you can mute. Thanks. So the other question then is you think about kind of what type or types you may want. whether any of the city's pre-reviewed plans work for you. And we'll flip through some of those later on so you can look through some of those and think about whether they could work. You can save some time and some money and some process by using those if they work for you. And then again, things we talked about on the last slide. And not only, cost and funds available, but it's important for people to think about time frame available, because costs and funds equal. You may have a mother who needs a house yesterday, and who's in your office right now that you want to get into housing quickly. So you may have some interest in going some of the quicker, pre-built, factory-built models to speed things up, more than as a financial cost. And then, but we're going to talk a little about sizes of these accessory units. And I'll point it out again, but we have some significant cost savings if our units fall under certain sizes. So I've talked about kind of the maximum allowed sizes you've heard, sort of 1,200, 1,000, 500, 400. But if your ADU, even if it could be a larger ADU, if you keep it under 750 square feet, you don't have to pay impact fees, these development impact fees, for schools and roads and other services that Prop 13 low property taxes don't cover. So you can save, depending on which jurisdiction you're in, potentially $10,000 or $20,000, but keeping your ADU under 750 square feet. Oops, slide jump forward. And so note that down, because that's a huge savings in this process. So we really want to encourage you to think smaller than 750. And then also space, so that's something we can help you look at. We'll go over setbacks and requirements next here, but what space you have, and do you have space to roll it in along the side of your house or from the back or some such. It's not impossible to drop a prefab over a house with a crane. We got bids for around $3,000 to $5,000 to lift and drop. So in the scheme of $100,000 or $200,000 housing project, the cost of craning over isn't huge, but it's an effort, so it may not be worth it for a prefab if you've got to do that lift and drop. The other things to think about, some others, are you looking for an economical project or a design project? There's a real kind of difference in how you may go about this if you're looking for high design than the lowest cost. So I like kind of to go through that and make sure people are sort of clear on back to their objectives there. And then maintaining privacy is an important one for people to think about sooner than later in their designs. Some things like lattice and screening can go up last minute after the fact. But for privacy, you can have a lot more privacy if you can move some windows around. So these windows in your ADU aren't facing into your bedroom windows, for example, or the kitchen window you like to keep open all the time, but you're in there in front of your sink and your robe at. So some of those things, by shifting windows a little where you have flexibility, you can have a much more comfortable shared yard and space and maintain privacy with a little more thought than less. So with that, let's talk a little about the Arroyo Grande ordinance. And so I'm going to go through this pretty quickly without city staff here, but want to let you know, basically, these ordinances allowances are pretty similar in all the jurisdictions. Like I said, even though the process is a little different. Okay. And so you can have your setbacks for your ADU and the side and the back just have to be 4 feet. So everybody, 4 feet as you're thinking about what you can do with the space you have, 4 feet from the side and the back. And your ADU can basically be up to 25 feet high.
5 and 10.
You have some space to go over your garage or do 2 stories. Is there a question on that? Any questions there?
I actually have a question. Can you comment again on that setback? You said 4 feet. Do you mean from the house or the road or?
Yeah, good question, right? Because it's a little confusing. On the setbacks, let me see, I'm going to flip forward in a slide and see if he's got a better description of that. These are the city slides that he's done in the past, not me. And no, we don't have a clear description, so I'll flip back. When I talk about setbacks here, the 4 feet, that's from the back lot line and the side lot line. So those two. In the distance from the house is a little negotiable depending on how much fire protection you put in your walls. You know, fire walling, and that gets a little too complicated for a quickie discussion, but figure at least 5 or 6 feet from your existing structure to be safe. And then your front setbacks, if you're trying to put any of this in the front, do vary. And I think most of your Arroyo Grande front setbacks are probably 20 feet, but I'm not sure of that yet. So if any of this is in the front.
20 or 25 is what your garage is.
25? Thanks, 25. So if you're thinking the front, we can look that up and make sure we're accommodating, but it'd be farther back in the front. But that said, state law does allow you to build them. So if there's no other way, you can cut into your front setbacks. For example, if you can't put one in the back because you don't have space, you can then cut into your front setbacks. So there are some opportunities there. Again, no parking unless you're more than half a mile from transit with your ADU. And then, let's see, I think we already talked enough about the types of units, so I won't talk more about that. But let's see. Okay, I'm going to flip to the next slide. I think we've gone through the rest of that. Let's talk a little bit about the pre-designed ADUs that are available. So Arroyo Grande, Morro Bay, Grover Beach, Atascadero, and somebody else has gone in, so I'm blanking out on one more jurisdiction on this same set of pre-designed plans. And the county, for you county residents, has just rolled out its own set of pre-designed ADU plans available on the county website. So these sets for Arroyo Grande have 6 sizes and 4 architectural styles. So we'll flip through some if we have time, but you've got the link in the chat to the Atascadero website where you can click and review all these styles on your own time. And if you're setting up feasibility visits with us, I highly recommend going through all of these before we come to meet, because if you like some of these and they can work for you, they can save you a fair bit of time and money. We'll go through the savings soon. And then, so yeah, style, size, design options are things you're going to want to go through. What you have to do to get to the pre-approved plans on your Arroyo Grande site is complete and submit a liability waiver. And I've talked to a resident there today who was having a hard time getting through that process online. So if you're struggling with that and you're interested in a feasibility visit, hold off and we'll go through that and help you figure out how to answer those questions. But in the meantime, sort of circumvent your Arroyo Grande site and just go look at the plans on the Atascadero site. So don't worry about it if you're struggling with that right away. We'll try to help you through that and get staff maybe to help set up a smoother process. So in order then to do that, you can get the pre-approved plans, and you can also in Arroyo Grande, you can do an online application for your permit. So it can in theory be pretty straightforward and doable for a homeowner to put in a permit request, especially if you're using the pre-approved plan sets. So they would need your setbacks that we talked about to show at least 4 feet. And they'd need to know where your utility connections are, distance from other structures like we talked about, and any easements on your sites. I've talked to a few Arroyo Grande residents that have utility easements or some kind of open space easements on their lots. So if you have any of those, you'd want to find out and note that on your application. And that's something we'll talk about on the site visits too, that it'd be helpful for you to check on or point out to us if we come on site visits. Those aren't always going to be apparent to us without detailed city records. So with that, then, that could be the information that in theory, any homeowner could piece together and submit a building application online for one of these types of homes. And so let's talk a little more about price. We've got, this is just, don't look at it, I'd say, because this may be more confusing than helpful. But this is a checklist then for the pre-approved plans of kind of what type. Here are the 4 types to choose from. And then the 6 sizes are somewhere on in this tiny print. So this is something maybe we can help you with, or you can look through a little more closely in the Atascadero site to see these check boxes. But in theory, you know, that could be navigable and something any of us could check off and do relatively easily. And then more kind of, this is where you could write in your site plan for your project with those items we talked about, and you know, be checking off a few more boxes in this pre-approved application. And so along with that, I know you're probably wondering, how much do I save, or what benefits do I have from using the pre-approved? And so a few. You've got some definite benefits. And like I talked about, one of those is a time benefit, how much time you can save producing any other drawings or figuring out what else to do. But you also have some dollar savings. And so quickly going through that on cost, if you go with the pre-designed ADUs, again, this is for Arroyo Grande City residents, could be quite different for other jurisdictions. And I can't answer those questions for other jurisdictions. But so for Arroyo Grande City residents, about $800 for plan review and $1,000 for inspections on the pre-reviewed. So say $2,000 for reviews. And then if you didn't go the pre-approved, you'd have roughly a $3,000 permitting fee for other projects. So maybe $1,000 baseline savings on permitting fees, not huge, but your big savings then could be in quicker permitting approval, and you don't have to spend the money on design, which we'll talk about in an upcoming slide, how much you may be looking at for design of some various ADUs otherwise. And then again, no impact fees if under 750 square feet. So that's huge and really something you want to keep in mind and come in under if something that size or less can meet your project objectives. And then some details, the impact fees if you go above 750 square feet in the city and at the county, I think other jurisdictions now too generally, but don't hold me to that. They charge percentage of the impact fees as to a primary house. So in this example, you know, if your 800 square foot ADU is half of a 1,600 square foot primary house, you'd pay 50% of the impact fees of a primary house. And again, those impact fees may range depending on your jurisdiction between $10,000 and $30,000. Yeah, so your savings is significant for under 750. And then you don't have any fees for utility connections unless you want some kind of new meters or new connections, and you don't have to get one, so up to you. In the city of Arroyo Grande, they have tacked on a $72 increase for sewer and water for a second unit, kind of an added base fee. I don't know if other services districts and providers do that or how it works. But, so that's a kind of reasonable $35-ish kind of added base fee, knowing your second unit's going to use some water, or it has to be available whether you use it or not. So be ready, that's a small charge that Arroyo Grande residents would see, and quite possibly residents on other water district billing systems. Yes, fire sprinklers are required if the primary home has sprinklers. No fire sprinklers required if the primary home doesn't have them. But keep that in mind or assess where you're at, because certainly sprinklers can add a bit to the cost, maybe under $10,000, $5,000 to $10,000, but it is something of a cost. And then also note, if you're building a detached ADU, you will have to put in solar panels, meet the new building code solar requirements. Those can go either on the primary or the secondary or a ground mount somewhere. But those would have to go in on new detached ADUs, not tiny houses on wheels, not JADUs, and not if your ADU is in existing space. So there are some exceptions, but figure solar's good and available and gotten relatively inexpensive. So figure your project will have some of that if it can. Any questions there on rough fees? We'll go through some more details of
Is it possible to be totally off grid in Arroyo Grande? I saw that your demo unit, I believe, even had a composting toilet and was off grid.
Yeah, thanks for asking. We can't go into a lot of the details, but yes, right now it is possible. The code does allow for off-grid electric. So definitely those systems are available to people and not too expensive. So we certainly encourage people to look at some opportunities, especially what we're going to talk about next. Some of our deal breaker kind of issues that are difficult with both hooking up sewers or hooking up to already fully loaded septic systems, and with hooking up to electrical panels that are already overloaded. So keep in mind the potential for off-grid systems. Yeah. And then with the waterless waste and not hooking up to sewers or septic, right now, a lot of jurisdictions allow a secondary toilet to be a waterless or composting toilet, but not the primary. So that's a bit problematic in a small house where you may only be putting in one toilet. But that's something we'd like to get some pilot projects going and made legal, but it's not yet. So thanks for asking. We hope you'll join us in pushing for some changes there, but not yet an option. We may be able to and get that made possible, I hope soon. But that's a little out of the scope of anything we can promise right now. Any other questions?
Yes.
Are you taking,
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just asking if you're taking questions in the chat too.
I will look at those once we get through the presentation. I'll run through those. Yeah.
Okay, well, the follow-up to that is, are you covering anything about expanding the tiny house movement or the ADU movement to places that are outside city limits?
Yeah, definitely. We've been working on trying to get tiny houses on wheels allowed in all the county jurisdictions. In fact, at a state level and federal level, we see more and more jurisdictions allowing them.
Is that going to be covered in this or no?
Unfortunately, that's another matter. So for this quick ADU talk, we don't have a lot on that, but I'd certainly encourage anyone who's interested in that to reach out to the supervisors if you're in the county, or your city council members if you're in other jurisdictions where they're not allowed. Yeah, was there another question?
Yes, just one more. On the impact fees, like especially on the ones that are larger than 750, you said that could be $10,000 to $30,000. Is that a one-time fee, or impact fees considered annual, or how does that work?
Yep. The impact fees are one-time fees. When Proposition 13 went into effect in the 70s, limiting ongoing yearly property taxes, jurisdictions were finding that those property taxes don't cover community services. So they needed a way to cover fire and police and schools separate from property taxes. So that's the impact fees that started getting charged up front for new development, to make sure, there's some pitch in for those things that aren't necessarily covered from the yearly payments. Yeah, so it's just a one-time there.
Thank you.
That augments the ongoing.
I had a question also.
Sure.
How about property taxes? How does this affect it? Do you get reevaluated and lose your stance as you own the property for a long time, or what happens?
Yep, good question. I'm going to get to that in our pro formas. So I'll answer that kind of tied in to the kind of costs, yearly costs of maintenance and ongoing costs of the units here next. Right. So we'll get to that in just a minute here. Thanks for asking. It's an important question. Yeah. So with that, let's just go right into those, knowing these different cost components, both the one-time costs to build these things and the ongoing costs are really important to whether this process makes sense for you. Let's talk about really, I put two components on this slide, but then there's the third component that Bob just talked about of kind of ongoing annual costs. So we'll look at those wrapped up in some pro formas next. But for purposes of building these things, we have two components here, and really important to think about. We've got our pre-development costs, which are what we need to just kind of get us to go, to know how much we may have to spend then next on the actual construction of the thing. So for pre-development, we need to think about several items kind of bundled in here. And the first is our due diligence in this process, that in a get lucky might cost us nothing because we've got some time and skill and know where our sewer lines are. But in a more process with more questions, the due diligence could cost us easily $5,000. Questions on two main items that we encounter that are really site specific and can cause challenges are hookups, as I mentioned, to wastewater systems, either to a sewer line or septic line, and electrical hookups. You may be maxed out on your lot with your septic if you're on a septic, or you may have to run a sewer line uphill long distance to tap into a sewer or upgrade a main, depending on where you are. So you really want to learn a little about where your sewer line is, how deep it's buried, whether you've got drop or whether you're going to have to install a pump to run sewage uphill, whether you're going to have to add to your current septic system. And those are questions that I'm not qualified to answer. And a lot of us as homeowners aren't going to be qualified to answer on their own. So those may take bringing a plumber out, to kind of look at the lines, maybe dig some trenches. In an older house, maybe you don't have any idea where the lines are, never mind how deep they are. So some of that could take some work. And then the second kind of bugaboo really from the get-go can be electrical hookups. And a lot of us in old houses are already challenged on our amperage, our service to our houses. We might blow circuits already in our everyday course of living. So those boxes aren't going to have enough power for a second unit. And so getting an electrician out to give some estimate or idea of what you'll have to do to get power to your second unit is really important, so you know what you may be looking at there. And so that could be from several hundred to several $1,000s to get an electrician there and give you some sense of your box upgrade. Beyond that, we're seeing some challenges with PG&E not having enough power at the block level at the transformers. So that's another thing that's important to look at. In some neighborhoods, that can be more rigmarole and time delay, while PG&E figures out how to get more power to the neighborhood to serve kind of increasing electrical loads. So two really important bits of due diligence there, along with things you can do, like figuring out your lot lines. That's another one. If you're going to be tight on your setbacks and you're not quite sure where your lot lines are, you might want or need to do a lot line survey. A fence doesn't necessarily sit on the lot line. So it's important to think about that one too. If you're on a slope, you may need to do some soil sampling or make sure that some work on the slope isn't going to cause problems. So that might be a little engineering involved. So some of these things can add up quicker than you think. And we don't want you to get into a problem, Freudian there, get into a project and then find you have a problem. We'd rather kind of what you're facing up front. And that can take a little work and money. Along with that, moving along design, you could easily spend for a simple kind of detached of, say, a garage conversion or something simple, you might be able to get a draftsman to do it for as little as $3,000. If you're going to design an ADU or want to go on the higher design side, you could be spending well upwards from $10,000 for an architect's design. So important to think about that too. And that's where your savings of your pre-approved plans can come in, where those designs land in the zero place. And then along with that, for your pre-development to get to go, you've got your permitting costs. And so that really varies depending on where you are. We went through them for the city of Arroyo Grande. That could be as little as $1,000 with the pre-approved, or for a tiny house on wheels, or $2,000 for a pre-approved. And it can be way upwards from there for people here in other jurisdictions and who may be in the coastal zone. In addition to your city or county permit, you may have to get a CDP, a coastal development permit, that could add on $5,000 or $10,000 to your permitting. So be ready. You've got quite a range of potential costs there. With that, then, you can get your permit in hand, then you can go on to your construction bids. So, I won't spend a lot of time. I think these are pretty obvious. For construction costs will really depend on whether you're going low end, what I call Home Depot finishes. I like them fine, but other people have a different aesthetic, or whether you're higher end. What you can figure roughly is, if you're calculating how many square feet you want, you could think in the $250 to $500 per square foot range. So if we had 1,000 square foot ADU, we might be looking at $250,000. If we're going, say, a 500 square foot, that might put us at $125,000, half of that on the lower side. So you could calc in those rough kind of range of costs. It really depends on the builder, the finishes, and a lot of things. Remember, some of the square foot quotes you get may be much higher than you're used to for conventional construction. Keep in mind with these houses, they're everything for a larger house, but smaller size. So your contractor needs all the same subs, and scheduling subs and getting them for very small jobs can be tricky and expensive. And you're building all the expensive plumbing stuff as a big part of your small ADU, not your cheaper kind of big bedrooms and areas that have less finishes and plumbing. So keep that in mind. Your per square foot price is likely to be quite a bit higher than other types of larger home construction. Along with that, like I mentioned, a couple issues we've seen sort of come up to keep an eye out for that can add costs and things you don't always know about in advance. Your electrical upgrades, sewer upgrades. We've had some cases where we thought we were doing a simple garage conversion, but the home was on the edge on low water pressure, and our garage conversion added more, water use. So we had to redo all the water lines. cost some money to the whole house, or the pipes coming in from the street to get bigger lines to keep up water pressure. And like I mentioned, septic issues. So that's kind of the quick and dirty on finance costs. But let's go through then some of our annual costs that Bob asked about. First of all, I'll quickly go through. I'm not a mortgage broker. I don't know. We may have some mortgage people, lenders here. I am not peeking at the audience, but we can open up. Somebody here?
And Sam Cotton here. How
Oh,
are
Sam
you?
here. Gotcha. Good. Hi, Sam.
So if there's any mortgage questions or about our 100% financing for ADU construction, I put the contact information for myself and the mortgage house in the chat.
Great. Thanks for that, Sam. Appreciate it. Because we know a lot of people don't have 200,000 or 100,000 in their pockets. What we're seeing is, so, getting funding is going to be a huge component of this. What we're seeing statewide, so is we're seeing a huge uptick in ADU construction, but we're seeing it to a large degree done by upper income homeowners who have cash in their pockets. And that's great. We're a huge fan, but we also want to open up this process as affordable housers to help lower income homeowners build and benefit from these opportunities. So finding ways that they can tap into lines of credit. A home equity line of credit is the most popular kind of way of borrowing. Along with that, we've got second mortgages, cash out refis, renovation and construction loans. And that's what, if I understood correctly, Sam has a construction loan that can be 100% of value. Right, Sam?
Yeah, that's correct.
So
And-
that's a nice option for people without cash in their pockets then to
And
get
it
that
also-
construction loan.
We're also working on providing assistance with plans, permits, and a contractor.
Great, great.
So
So
it's-
some packages there. So we'll open it up after I get through the general presentation, and hopefully maybe you can describe a little more of that opportunity then. So anybody, please, in case we don't get much time, do reach out to Sam's got his info, and any other lenders or builders, hope you've put your info in the chat so people can see it and take advantage of that. We've certainly got some contacts we'll share later when we do feasibility visits. But want to then just note the last item on this slide, some of you probably have heard, and the city website references the Cal HFA loan that offered a $40,000 forgivable loan for pre-development costs. And that was a really nice opportunity for some homeowners to tap into some kind of free money for pre-development. That was slow on the uptake, but now as of the last 2 months, all of those loans have been taken. So we'll see if the legislature approves some more money for that program starting next year. So keep your eyes on that. We'll be happy to help people kind of hook up to that. And I hope Sam will too, and the other lenders kind of be able to help tap homeowners into that if some new money is approved in the new fiscal year. Unfortunately, again, not available right now, and we're not sure how that's going to go with budget as it is. With that, let's just talk briefly about sort of, this is development cost. Few quick sort of pro formas here on sort of 3 scenarios. So one is an ADU with a loan, a tiny house on wheels with a loan, and an ADU without a loan. And just quickly buzzing through these, I made some assumptions. ADU might cost 150,000 plus some permits and site costs coming in at 185, which is possible, but probably a bit on the low end. A tiny house on wheels, I think a pretty realistic number. Possible you could do a little less at 100,000. And then this ADU, same scenario, but without a loan at 185. And basically then, I can't see the bottom of my screen, which is funny. I don't know if you see the bar on my screen. I don't know if you can see the bottom of my screen. I don't know how to change that bar. Oh, well, I'm going to flip to the next slide because that bottom line kind of monthly payment is there and also shows on this slide here that with our ADU, if we had a target kind of affordable rent at a low income affordable, that's a little high for low income affordable, but by next year when you've built this thing, that's probably going to be about right. 14
Ann,
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt. Can you
Sure.
share your screen?
Oh, yeah, I am. Are you not seeing it?
There it is. Thank you. Sorry.
Yep. Okay, good. Glad you can see it. Yep. So say 1,400, a low income affordable rent. That's what we want to encourage you to look at. Certainly you can rent these things for more. So that's there. You might see property taxes at around 150. And so I'm going to answer the question that Bob had earlier in a little more detail now. You see that 150 for the ADU, but not for the tiny house on wheels. Because the tiny house is on wheels, it's not real property. It's personal property like an RV. So you don't have any property tax on that. You pay your DMV kind of permitting fee of whatever that is per year, maybe a few hundreds or something to keep your registration up to date on your tiny house on wheel trailer, but no property tax. And property tax assessments are made on the new construction, but the new construction only. So there's often a question about if you're benefiting from low Prop 13 taxes, whether your kind of outside savings will go away. And the answer is no. There's no reassessment on anything existing except an assessment on the new construction. And that's somewhat tied into the cost of construction. So say you spend $150,000 on your ADU, your new assessment would be roughly 1% of that. So you'd be looking at 1,500 or so, 1,800 or so a year. So that's what this 150 is off of. So some property taxes, but it's not a huge added expense and no reassessment or loss of existing benefits. Along with that, kind of in our monthly payments, we want to be assuming some utility fee. Like we talked about in Arroyo Grande, that'll be the base fee of $32 for water, no matter how much is used, and some other costs for utilities. And then insurance is something important to consider, a little bit for insurance for any of these units. But you'll want to make sure you get new homeowners insurance and that your ADU is covered. So with that, under these sort of loan payment scenarios, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this just very rough pro forma, but to say Sam has a 20-year loan, or it's typical that you could get a 20-year or more ADU loan and spread your payments out over more years. On the tiny house on wheel loan, because it's personal property, your loan period probably has to be 10 years or less, maybe even 5 or 7, depending on what loan you get. So your payment's looking about the same for a lower cost project, but because you're paying it off in half the time or so. So I like to point out that payment period spread is really important, when you'll be done with that. And then cash flow, we see in these first few scenarios with loans, our cash flow isn't great. It's either slightly negative or just in the barely positive at a low income affordable rent and having to take, a loan on that full price of construction. And with a no loan, then, you're looking pretty good if you've got the cash in your pocket. And even on a low income affordable rental, you're, still getting around $1,000 a month. And I want to say, for those of you that want kind of cash flow, this shows you may struggle a bit with the higher cost ADUs to get a real positive cash flow. These things really make sense more with a sort of social objective to create the housing or with a family objective to age in place. These things look really good And I wanted to add in another column kind of comparing to the $6,000 or $8,000 that older adults may have to spend to go into assisted living or care. So these things start to look really positive compared to that $6,000 or $8,000 per month to keep seniors, at home and in their neighborhoods at a much lower cost. But it doesn't always pencil out to a great cash flow otherwise. So that's really important to be realistic about, and why we encourage some of the lower end type, smaller types of construction where people can get a positive cash flow and keep those on the more affordable side. And so I think there probably are some questions on that, but I want to flip through 2 slides so that we can go through a few more questions and I can shut down the presentation and see you. So I'll go through those quickly before I call for more questions or start trying to read the chat. Basically, a quick few notes about construction. We want to make sure that you choose the right builder and contracting team for you. So some questions to ask, just very quick kind of questions, whether they do design build or just build. You might get a contractor who can help you with the design and permit. And so if you don't want to do that or find your own architects or draftsmen, a lot of them will, know those people and can do all that for you as a fully inclusive package if you're willing to pay for it. So that's something to consider and ask about when you're talking to contractors, what kind of package they have. Like Sam mentioned that he's working with some teams and can provide some of that along with the loan. And also then, what that would be, the cost for design and permitting is part of that. And then you'll also want to find out what other ADUs they've built and whether they're in the kind of cost range you're interested in, low end or high end. A high end specialty builder may not work if you want a quick, may not be your best bet if you want a Home Depot finishes kind of quick ADU. So think about that and make sure your builder kind of aligns with your style there. They can both work, but different builders may do different things. You may want to get some references of other projects. And the other important component, have they constructed ADUs in your jurisdiction? What's worked in the county, may not work so well in Arroyo Grande City by process, or you may save some time and grief if your builder knows the process of your exact jurisdiction. So that can help if they're familiar with that. Also, you might want to know how many projects they work on at once and whether the contractor contact will be on site with the crew. If you're someone who likes to have one contact and know who's in charge and communicate with them, you might want to make sure they're kind of a hands-on builder and not someone who's just going to send out different crews different days. That may not be the person for you. If you need less sort of contacts there, any number of things can work. You can check contractors' licenses and insurance on the California State Licensing Board website, so you can Google that and get that information. And then another really important one, beyond just cost and style, is finding out if the contractor you're talking to, their time schedule aligns with yours. If you need a house for your mother yesterday and you found a great contractor you really like, but her time schedule, she doesn't have any openings to start doing things for 6 months because they're overloaded, that may still not be the contractor for you. So make sure you get some sense of sort of scheduling availability along with the rest of the package, so you know what's realistic and whether that can work for what you need. And with that, just a quick slide on renting and management. And again, I want to mention no short-term rentals shorter than 30 days with this ADU permit. So if you're looking for vacation rentals, look at some other options. For maintaining and managing your ADU, just want to remind you, it takes some work. You're becoming a landlord, but it also has a huge value of kind of building community with extra space. So you get some benefits at some costs there. And added costs like we looked at in the pro forma, you've got some maintenance, some insurance, property taxes, and I'm missing utilities on that list. So, it's important to make sure people are realistic about those ongoing added costs. And then rental management companies can help you if you don't want to be a hands-on manager. So important to kind of think about, if you want property management, think about a typical kind of 8% fee structure. And you saw the pro forma, your cash flow may be right on the line. If you've got to pay 8% out of that for property management, that's important to think about. And so with that, I'm going to switch off of the slides and open it up to questions here. And maybe first, I'll just stop talking for a moment, stop the share, and look at the chat questions and see if there are some we haven't covered yet. So let's see, just going to take me a moment to get to chat. Okay. Okay, we talked a little bit then about legalizing tiny houses on wheels. So yeah, I'm really hoping we can get some traction there, but that's going to take all of us kind of leaning on our city council members and our supervisors to do that together. So if you want some contacts for supervisors or council members in your jurisdiction, we can help with that later. If I put a tiny house in, most of these fees would not apply, right? Let's see, Michelle, what fees do you mean, most of these fees? Can you help me on that question a little? Is Michelle here? Maybe she's tuned out. Okay, we'll skip that one. Okay, we've got Sam's opportunity through the mortgage house. Email a copy of the recording. What we'll do is put a link to the recording somewhere. So if you're interested in that, please check back at our website. I'm not positive we'll get that to everyone directly. We'll try, but you'll be able to find it on our website, or reach out to us if you're not finding it and you want it. We'll certainly send you a link. Is the rental amount controlled by the city? No. Everyone, we're affordable housers at SmartShare, so we want to encourage you to build affordable ADUs. But in fact, you can charge market value for ADUs, and if that's $3,000 for what you build, so it is. So it's not controlled by the cities at all. It's really a factor of market value and kind of what kind of deal you're willing to offer someone who needs lower income housing, maybe, or not. Up to you. And that looks like all the chat questions, I think. So since we got to those, and we still have a couple of minutes, for those of you on, what other questions do you have? John? Please. We've got about 5 minutes left.
I'm just an appraiser and I want to keep an ear and eye on things that may affect values to houses in the area. And I'm just trying to get some information.
Great. Thanks for joining. Yeah, it would be really interesting to see where appraisals come in. I don't think we really have enough information yet. People have asked kind of about added kind of value of these things. And I'm not sure we really know just how much value they're going to add compared to costs yet. So it'll be interesting to see more research as we go along and get more comps available. Any other questions here? We have a few more minutes. I know some of you may need to log off, so really appreciate your joining. And yeah.
Oh, sorry to interrupt. I have just a couple. One is, what if you're looking to build like a ADU attached to an accessory dwelling unit, like a workshop or a garage or something, like, so an additional structure that's part ADU, part workshop? Do the rules change, or is there anything else we should be considering or looking into with that?
Well, I think you may just need some firewall separation between your workshop area and your living space. So I
Okay.
would think about that, there's a whole kind of thick drywall and, slowing any fire potential down. So you need that sort of between a garage or a workshop space. And that's the only thing I think of straight offhand that it'd be something to consider is that wall between construction.
Great, thank you. And do you have any recommendations on how you find a partner that's a designer, general contractor? I think it was like step 2 or 3 in your list on like find a professional to work with. Do you have any recommendations on that?
That's right. I like to give those talking to people a little more about what they're looking for and what their style is, because like I mentioned, that really varies. So there's not really kind of a one size fits all answer. We're also a little bit liable, or we don't want to preference any builders. But that said, we do know some working in this space who are doing lots of projects and are really interested in more of these. So I'm going to say reach out to us, info@smartsharehousing-solutions.org, and we can learn a little more, or preferably if you're in the city, schedule a feasibility visit. And then we can give you some connections at that point, getting a better sense of what you're after. I know that's a little hedgy.
That's okay. Thank you, Anne. I really appreciated this entire presentation. It's been very helpful.
Yep. Glad to have everyone. Any more questions?
I have
we
a real
log off?
quick, question. There are 2 ADUs being built from scratch across the street that are actually connected to the houses. I have a garage that I'm thinking about converting into an ADU. Does that make a difference does it make it easier for me to do that because they're already building them across the street?
I don't know how projects near you affect yours. I guess to the degree that you might talk to your neighbors and learn some things from them, about what worked and what didn't, and who the best person to talk about in your jurisdiction is. So I'd say that probably helps you, that you have a nice kind of nearby opportunity to learn some things. And if there's a builder around and some tradesmen, to kind of nab them and talk to them directly. So yeah, I think that helps you in a lot of ways if you can make use of those existing opportunities right there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Great presentation.
Yeah, glad
Yes.
to have everyone. And I can stay on for a little while. So if people would like to stay on and ask a few more questions, I'm happy to stay on for a few more minutes. If you do want to log out, I'd encourage you to jot down the links, paste and copy maybe to somewhere, the links in the chat, again to your Arroyo Grande website for the online permitting, also to the Atascadero website to more easily look at all of the available pre-approved plans, to our smartsharehousing-solutions.org website for all kinds of useful information. And again, info@smartsharehousing-solutions.org, which is in there at the bottom of my long kind of laundry list of contacts. If you'd like to schedule a feasibility visit, reach out and then we'll send you the link to the sign up for those visits. Again, please make sure if you do that, you are a on-site homeowner resident in the city of Arroyo Grande. I see a question from Oceano. That's a county jurisdiction. And I'm sorry, we don't have any funding for county specific projects, but check the county website, SLO County there. Other questions? As people log off, I'm happy to take a few more. And thanks again, everyone, for coming, and please do reach out.
Thank you. Great job.
Thank you, Anne. Very helpful.
Yep, glad it can help. Hope people can follow through with some projects and get them built with minimal grief and money.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Good night. Any other questions anybody has? Good night.